Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Eunice, and in today's video I'll be giving you 5 art tips that I wish I knew as a beginner. These are tips that you probably don't hear that often on the internet, you probably don't hear that often on YouTube, but they're actually very helpful in improving your art and making your art look so much better in a very drastic way. So my first tip for today is always do a value check. And what is value? Value is simply the lightness and darkness of a color. That is the most simplified way of defining what value is, and it is the most important aspect of a painting and an illustration. It is more important than color, more important than saturation. And why is it important? Because it creates focus, it helps guide the viewer to the focal point, it can help create contrast and depth in your drawing. And I will also say that sometimes, especially if the color is very saturated, it doesn't look as it appears. Like you might think, oh, you can pick a very bright red, for example, and think that that is probably going to be a very light color. But then you desaturate it and you realize that it is actually darker than you expected. Or it could even be the other way around, where you pick a light color, maybe in the blue, because I noticed that cooler tones tend to be generally darker than warmer tones. It's going to be very hard to explain, but I'm going to show you on my Procreate app.
So I'm on Procreate now, and I'll quickly swatch a yellow tone. And then I'll go back to my colors bar and select a blue color. And you'll see that I didn't change the saturation or the lightness at all. The saturation and the value is the same. I just changed the hue. So you would think because of that they'll be in the same color range, but just watch as I desaturate the colors. I'll pick a gray color now. And you see instantly that the blue is much darker than the yellow, even though I did not change the value and the saturation at all. It just changed because blues are generally darker than yellows. Cooler tones are generally darker than warmer tones.
My second tip, you guys will not like this, but it's really going to help your art to grow. It's really going to help you improve dramatically. It is being open to criticism. When we are especially when you draw something for a very long time, it's very hard to see the mistakes in that thing. So getting a fresh eye and a fresh angle will actually help you to improve. So getting criticized is not a bad thing. This would be maybe a Discord, like an art Discord, where people leave, their art for criticism. That could be a good idea. You could learn from each other and also give input on other people's art. And you could also maybe when you post on social media, ask for feedback, ask for criticism, because if you just post your art without asking for those things, people will shy away from criticizing your art. There are some people that are not shy about criticizing your art, and when those people come, when those people surface, you have to make sure that the critiques are actually good and generally good advice, because you find some people, like, they might criticize your work online, but they're actually maybe worse artists than you and they don't know what they're talking about. And because I remember posting this art a while ago. It's still in my memory because I just found the critique very crazy. I'm open to criticism, guys. If you criticize my art on Instagram, I'm not going to be like, why are you criticizing my art? I'm not like that. But this critique was just, there was no way that made sense to me. Basically telling me that green and blue don't match. Like, how does that make sense? How do they not match? And that was the only colors in the color palette, so I was very confused by that. So I would say, just know where you're getting your criticism from. That's all I'm going to say. And you can also maybe try a mentorship program. I'm sure that there are artists online where they do mentorship programs alongside doing courses and tutorials. So if you're really serious about growing your skill and maybe you don't want to, pay the high price of going to colleges or university, then mentorship programs are probably a better option. And I will also say that watch what other artists are doing, because when you watch artists process, tutorials, courses, things like that, you start to see the things that you are doing wrong in your own art. Of course, different artists, don't just stick to one. If you really want to learn and improve your skill, you have to learn from multiple people and multiple minds. And my third tip is a tip that beginners don't even think of at all. Like, it just skips their mind. It took me a while for me to actually realize that I need to consider perspective. Yes, my next tip is talking about perspective. Perspective is very important in creating dimension and depth to your art. You have to make sure that you have the right perspective in your drawing, and this is very obvious when you start to put your characters in backgrounds and you realize that, oh, you need to create an horizon line, and then you realize that your character's perspective has to match the environment perspective. Otherwise the character is just going to look very wonky and awkward. And even for simple portraits, as simple as portraits might be, you still have to consider perspective, because your characters are going to, features in the face, for example, are going to look different from different angles. So if I say, for example, my face is at a 3/4 angle, you start to realize that maybe a part of the eye is becoming less visible, and that is because of perspective. So you need to remember perspective to know how to create the form of the shape. It will help you to create better shape, help you to create better volume, and help you to emphasize the form of your shapes. And my fourth tip would be to study materials of objects, because different objects, different subjects have different materials. This is based on the opacity, this is based on the texture, the finish, even the color. So you have to, understand how different materials work. Like a velvet fabric, the way light hits a velvet fabric is going to be different from the way the light hits a latex fabric. For example, latex is more reflective, which means that you have more glossiness to it, have more shine, and you have to render it differently from a velvet fabric where it is more silk. It has that more silky texture. And if you're rendering skin, you have to also consider, because skin has a slight translucency, it's not 100% opaque, it has a slight translucency to it. So you have to consider, like, in certain lighting you probably have subsurface scattering. If you don't know what subsurface scattering is, just Google it, and I probably have another video talking about that, or I might do another video talking about subsurface scattering later in the future. So yeah, all I'm trying to say here is that the material and finish of an object will affect the way you render that object. So studying different materials will help you to build your visual library and to know how to render certain things. My last and final tip for today's video is to start with the big shapes. This will help to create better flow, movement in your art. It will help you to create more stylistic drawings. It will help you to simplify shapes as well, rather than going into the intricate details. Especially if you're trying to create your own art style, or trying to create a more simplistic style, I would say that starting with the big shapes is very vital in creating a more stylistic look and more flow and movement. I noticed that whenever I start bigger, like big strokes, big shapes, I tend to have more flow in my character, more movement, and more gesture in my character than when I go straight into applying those details. And it will help you to also pull back on the details that are not necessary in making your art look aesthetic or beautiful. And yeah, that's all the tips I have for you guys. I can do a part 2 to this video, so if you want that to happen, please make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you comment down below what kind of tips and advice that you want from me, and I'll be sure to get that. Thank you so much for watching and have a lovely day. Bye bye.